Welcome back, everyone, to the Risk Intel podcast, powered by SRA, where we share risk intelligence from experts across the banking industry. I'm your host, Ed Vincent, Executive Vice President at SRA. Hello, welcome to the Risk Intel podcast. I'm Ed Vincent, and with me today is co-founder and CEO of Strategic Risk Associates, Michael Glotz.
Hey, Ed, it's great to be with you again.
Michael, great to have you as always. Thank you very much for joining us. Today's topic is risk improvement activities. When you designed the SRA Watchtower platform, the holistic platform, risk intelligence platform, one of the things that you built into that was the concept of identifying opportunities for improvement within an organization, whether you want to call them gaps or you want to call them opportunities to strengthen a risk program. Take us back to the beginning as to why you built in this concept of capturing risk improvement activities. Then maybe after that we can talk a little bit about how that's used and what regulators think about that. But kind of start, if you will, from the beginning as to why did you want to capture risk improvement activities?
Yeah, and Ed, for those old school people out there, the old school bankers, it was issue tracking. And issue tracking is a cold hard way. Yeah, they are issues, but hey, change that term in your bank to risk improvement activities and see kind of how that adds a little bit of lift to that, because it's the same thing, but one's the positive side. Hey, we're going to improve our risk profile. One is the negative side. It's an issue. So I'm a glass half full person, Ed. So rename that risk improvement activities. I had a challenge. I had a challenge when I was at Capital One Financial, as we were back almost 20 years ago. We had a consent order that we were trying to remediate. And one of the things I had to help with is aggregating those issues or those risk improvement activities. And my God, Ed, they were everywhere across the company. Every department was managing them in their own way, and sometimes in their own format.
Mm-hmm.
You had the credit team managing their issues, the regulatory team, and really the best practice and really almost the only effective way to do it is decentralized management of those risk improvement activities or those issues, but centralized reporting and monitoring, which means consistency across the organization. And that can drive a better risk culture as well when you're using one common system, one common process. Advice number one, get rid of the Excel spreadsheets. Everyone that I know loves their Excel spreadsheets, but getting an aggregated view of all your risk allows you then to do really aggregated reporting throughout the organization. And it should be done in a way where, for instance, internal audit is able to do issue tracking and management to the audit committee and just slice it out and do that reporting top to bottom, but aggregate it, use a common format. And in some cases, you'll want to have automated workflow because some issues need to be approved before they're closed. So if you're going to implement something that I would recommend, make sure you have automated workflow if you're going to move off the Excel spreadsheets. And that could be one of the top 5 risk process issues I see in banks across the US is ineffective issue tracking or ineffective risk improvement activity management.
All right, quite a lot to unpack there. Several best practices. I'll recap that in a minute, but you talked about ways to capture risk improvement activities or issues and to aggregate that and look at it across the organization. Why do regulators care about this? Let's kind of step outside the bank, if you will, look from the outside in. Why is this a hot button when a regulator comes in, whether it's for an exam or kind of an interim conversation with a bank executive?
Yeah, the regulators are looking for a bank that has effective system really to assess risk, to manage risk, to monitor risk, and to mitigate risk. So they're looking for an effective system that can do that. Well, the mitigate risk part of that last part requires that you do something. It requires action. Those are the risk improvement activities, those risk action plans, those issue tracking. And so if you have an organized way, that's one of the 4 legs of the stool in risk management, is the mitigate, and a core part of mitigation is issue tracking and issue management. And they're also looking for internal audit, on those high risk, to be overseeing those from an independent standpoint. So, hey, you just got done closing a high risk issue. Audit should be cycling those and reviewing those. And your chief risk officer should be monitoring the relative level. How do you do that, Ed, if it's all over the place and you're not aggregating? It's really tough to do. So that second and third line, really can do their job best. The first line, to the credit department, it doesn't matter that it's aggregated. They only care about credit. But think about kind of the board, the management team, the second and third line.
The regulator then really is interested in ensuring that you have mitigation plans, right? You're taking action, that there is oversight, and that there is progress, right? And so to be able to illustrate, right, we were at point A, now we're at point B, we're going to point C. That's going to give you the regulator the peace of mind that there's an awareness of risk within the bank, and that there is a conscious plan to address that over time.
Yeah, one other thing I would throw in there, Ed, is, we talked earlier that the board should understand the top 10 risk of the organization. And those are the risks that are impacting earnings and capital. It's a best practice to take each one of those top 10 risks and identify risk improvement activities to mitigate your total risk exposure. Even in a thing like economic, an economic correction could be a top 10 risk. There's ways to mitigate that in terms of monitoring the economic environment, and reducing the impact. So one of the other best practices is make sure those top 10 risks have risk mitigation activities, one or many risk mitigation activities there to lower your overall risk exposure as an organization.
A risk improvement activity could tie to multiple different processes or risks as well, right? So it's a robust tracking system there would allow you to have one activity that could impact multiple different risks. And so, right, that goes to your point of centralization and common format and vernacular. All right, Michael, quite a bit there around best practices, centralized reporting and monitoring, allowing for aggregation, common format, automated workflows, all of that driving a culture of risk within an organization. And then the concepts of mitigation, oversight, and progress, and taking action on those improvement activities once you've identified them. And then finally, tying back those risk improvement activities to the top risks inside the organization, so that you can show the regulator that you're aware of what those risks are and that you have attack plans in place to address and mitigate each of those. Thank you for the primer on risk improvement activities, or AKA issue tracking. We appreciate the glasses half full perspective on that, Michael.
Thanks, Ed.